Hello, welcome once again to Matt's Palace of Persia. Not quite. This is my official tier list for Prince of Persia games. I went back to play the Rogue Prince of Persia again since it's been getting lots of updates. I also checked out a few others, and then I just, sort of got the itch. So there's actually quite a few, probably more than you realize, Prince of Persia releases that are worth talking about. Now, there's obviously a lot of ports of like the first two games, specifically Prince of Persia 1. There's Genesis, Amiga, Atari ST. We're not going through all of those. That's a little intense. I thought I'd take a look at every single game that I feel was like warranted enough new content or retitling, or a couple of years had passed, that sort of thing. Because there are some that are kind of like, oh, those are sort of ports. Yeah, kind of. They're in the gray area. But when I looked at the amount of obscure ports there were Prince of Persia 1, I didn't think, we'd have to do every single port. And there's also some like escape games that Ubisoft released, like actual real life escape VR things that I don't even think are possible to play anymore. So yeah, so let's get started with Prince of Persia 1, the classic. I played this on MS-DOS back in the day, and absolutely blown away. And guess what? Prince of Persia 1 still holds the fuck up. Holds up as well as the prince does, holding on to the edge of a precarious platform placed above a pit of spikes. I've seen so many documentaries and bits of behind the scenes stuff from Jordan Mechner about what he went through to make it, his diaries during the development. When you go back and play it, it's just as good, really, honestly. It's all about the level design, obviously. The mechanics, there's not much to it, but it doesn't need to be, as long as level design is interesting. And plus those cutscenes, one of the earlier games I can remember ever being cutscenes there. It's hard to sort of place this one. It's either a nearly perfect prince, but it has no business being in Prince in Training, a solid duke, a dire Dahaka, and the pauperest of paupers. If I was to say there's anything really wrong with it, that the prince's standard design where he's just wearing the white getup and just has like a schlock of blonde hair, like I really prefer the one in Prince of Persia 2 where he has the turban and he has like the little vest. Like I love that. So when you play like say the Super Nintendo version, they have that version of the prince in there. Not to say that the Super Nintendo version's any good. It's fine. It's serviceable. But the classic one, a king of princes, certainly. Now, moving on to Prince of Persia 2, The Shadow and the Flame. Even though I like the prince's design and the first level's fantastic, I don't like this one nearly as much as the first. It's just a kind of weird. It focuses a lot more on fantasy elements, like wild fantasy elements, like flying horses and shit, magic carpets, and lots and lots of puzzles. It was smart and bold to focus a game where it's like, oh, I really want to do something different and not do the same sort of dungeon-esque levels of Prince of Persia 1. And I don't think it worked out super well in the end. Still looks amazing. The imagination on display is great, but I think I'm even dropped that to Prince in Training. The game just has this weird sort of awkward flow after the first level. As a kid, I never got much farther when you enter the caves and stuff, so I think Prince in Training makes the most sense to me right now. I might need to go back and rethink it a little bit, but right now I'm happy with Prince in Training. It is a sort of game where it's like, oh, I wish someone would remake that, and they sort of did. We'll get to that a bit later. But Prince in Training for Shadow and the Flame. I wish I could rate it higher, though, honestly. I don't think I can wish to rate it higher with Prince of Persia 3D / Prince of Persia Arabian Nights on the Dreamcast. Even though that was an updated port with some fixed things, it's not much better. It honestly isn't. Prince of Persia 3D, I did a whole what happened about it. It certainly was a tale worth telling. This is definitely one of those games where the transition to 3D just didn't work. Even if you were to say, hey, let's model it after Tomb Raider, that doesn't work. You need very slick, reactive platforming for that, and the grid sort of based movement style just kind of didn't work. There's a lot of ambition in it for sure, Again, check my What Happened episode if you're not aware of what they were planning to do with this game, and they simply kind of ran out of time and money towards the end. The publisher kind of was going out of business at the time, etc., etc. Unfortunately, they really couldn't salvage it. I really wish the Dreamcast port had been like a big overhaul of it, but that was not to be so. It has little improvements, but they're all lateral movements. It doesn't really help much. So Prince of Persia 3D, I want to say that's a dire dahaka. Every time I've attempted to boot it up, it's just so slow. It's not fun. It doesn't really make you feel like you're playing a Prince of Persia game at all. It makes you think you're playing a bad Tomb Raider knockoff with a Prince of Persia skin. You know, poppers of poppers? No, because there is a lot of, like I said, ambition and design and stuff that's in the game. It just doesn't come together to be like a well-playing, well-aged title in the franchise at all. This is something that someone needs to take a PC port and remaster and make good again. And like you know the Tomb Raider remasters 1, 2, and 3, and then the new one coming up. Someone absolutely needs to do that with this. Night Dive, you listening? This is a weird one, and I know what you're saying. Oh, well, the next one, Sands of Time. It's not. When Ubisoft eventually got the license, they released this first onto mobile phones. Prince of Persia Harem Adventures. This one's really weird because this is one of the only official images I could find of it, I think. And it's got Sands of Time Prince, but as far as I know, in gameplay, you're only ever the prince from Prince of Persia 2. So Ubisoft had Gameloft make this, and it's just a clunky game based on Prince of Persia 2 kind of graphics a little bit, like it's the same prince. Its problems beyond that are its sort of problematic story threads where you're trying to save the 7 wives of the Sultan. It's hard to, really be critical of Java-based phone games back in the day. They're not controlled very well. You're using like a keypad, so the game is a way slower. They slowed it down, way down. And in between each level, you get a pretty sultry picture of one of the wives saying, "Oh, that dungeon you must have gone through must have been real tough. Let these magic hands do that." It's one thing if they're making its own standard standalone game that's not based on the franchise, but when you're coming off like the original 2 games, which have all this prestige and class, Prince of Persia Harem Adventures is just not it. So I'm putting this in pauperest of paupers. It's crazy to me that this was the first one, the first release under Ubisoft, but it's actually somewhat not surprising. Fortunately, what we have next is Sands of Time. I was so hyped for this back in the day. I don't know exactly what it was. I think it was just my nostalgia for the first 2 games. But when I really started seeing gameplay of it, like on IGN, circa 2002, I was just like, wow, this looks so awesome. Prince of Persia is actually back, and look how smooth the platforming looks, and you can wall run and all this crap. And then when I kind of caught wind, oh, it's made in Montreal. And I'm like, wow, it's made in my town. That's awesome. I just had this kind of swell of pride that such a big game. This is really, this and the 1-2 combo of Splinter Cell is really what put Ubisoft Montreal, which is really still their premier studio, on the map. So I would say right off the bat to put it to nearly perfect Prince, but let me get my thoughts out there. At the end of the day, almost everything about Sands of Time is perfect. The music, the graphics, the voice acting, the script, how the controls feel, etc., etc. It's the combat that does let it down a little bit, in that very early on, I'd say at the 60% mark, you stop getting any new powers, any new attacks, and the game just kind of goes on and on with that. And the combat doesn't really get any more interesting after that particular point. And what's more is that a lot of the combat is just waves and waves and waves of enemies in big open rooms. They're every so often, I'd say every 30 minutes, they'll present you with that. And it just kind of breaks the pacing a little bit, I find. That's why I hope whenever the Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake comes out, that might not even be 2025, So I kind of wanted to do this video now because I don't really want to wait for that. That kind of makes it, every time I go back and play Sands of Time, I go, this is kind of a problem. The fact that there's also no boss fights. The end boss fight is not even a boss fight. It's mostly kind of a weird QTE, or it's just sort of nothing. And there's very few enemy types. Like, enemy variety is very, very low. And originally they were supposed to have way more. There's supposed to be animals and like these sand tigers that you would fight. There's cut content, unfortunately. So with that said, I don't think I can put it in King of Princes, because like I think Prince of Persia 1 is, for what it is, pretty perfect. And this is just so nearly perfect. And I'm like being generous in the sense that like, oof, combat not being great after a certain point, that's a big problem. But because everything else is so strong, so absolutely top tier, classy, well written, and it's the last one that, as far as I know, Jordan Mechner had any direct input on, I think that equals out to being nearly perfect. You know what's less than nearly perfect is Warrior Within. Look, I know all you edgelords out there, throw your hands in the air. You'll defend Warrior Within, especially if you were like 16, 17 when this came out. But Prince of Persia Warrior Within has absolute problems. And I'm not even talking about the thematic problems and the soundtrack and the character design and the huge dip in quality of writing. I'm just talking about the gameplay stuff. Like, there's absolute issues. There's bugs. The freeform fighting system had flaws. Like, this game has a lot of problems. But it still has a lot of great positives to it as well. Like the freeform fighting system, when it is working, it is interesting. They did flesh it out over Sands of Time. It is better overall, even though the level design is not nearly as, you know, colorful, as exotic. It's still really good level design for the most part. You can go all over a giant island, so there's a lot of more visual variety in the terms of, well, you're actually, you know, scampering up and jumping off. So there's that. The Dahaka as a concept is really cool, and our boss fight is fine, but the real ending being a thing you can very much miss, especially after a certain point in the game. If you didn't get all the sword upgrades, you get locked out of a particular one, and you can still like go on and get one or two more, but just because of poor level design, you can get locked out due to like an event cutscene, and then you just can't get the real ending. Putting a real ending based on like optional upgrades for a sword, kind of a boneheaded move, and they needed to fix that next time around. So it has problems. I think it's a solid Duke, because I didn't even mention all the tonal problems I have with it. Even back in the day, I was like 19 when this came out, and like I was just like, this isn't the game that I really love, Sands of Time. And there's, oh, it's character progression. It's character progression, but it's to being an asshole. It's not great. It all doesn't work. Like, it is such a tonal shift to the wrong direction, too much in the wrong direction. I don't mind it getting a bit darker, but it went way too far. And even though it implements a few boss fights as well, notably the Dahaka at the end, a couple of little sort of boss fights, that has some annoying enemies for sure. So I think that could possibly justify me putting it very much in the middle of the road. Please don't come for me, Warrior Within fans, because I know you're all warriors. Would I love Warrior Within to be remade? Yes, I would love that, actually. Even a really good remaster that actually fixes things, like, you know, Night Dive tends to actually fix things and add in content, I would play that, absolutely, and I'd probably love it and rate it higher. So I have Prince of Persia Revelations here, and for those who do not remember, this was a port for the PSP, released about a year later, maybe a bit less, that added new content, added a bunch of different levels that Pipeworks Interactive, the makers of the Godzilla fighting game trilogy, did. You notice them because they're not great. They're big, gray, empty rooms, and they really don't fit in with the rest of the level layouts. They just didn't have those textures to work with, I guess. That I can't remember, but when I booted this up on a PSP way back in the day, I was not impressed. I was kind of hoping for a much better version of Warrior Within, Within, and it's not that. I don't know where this would actually place it, because there's the portability aspect of it, and that's nice, but does that really matter anymore? Like, not really. So I'm not sure if it's any better than Warrior Within. I don't think it's much worse. Those new areas are negative in terms that they're kind of just ugly to look at. I'm gonna put that in Dire Dahaka for now. Another Warrior Within related game is Battles of Prince of Persia. Battles of Prince of Persia automatically at Dire Dahaka. I do not like this game. Listen, like strategy sort of games, like your Fire Emblems and such, I have played and enjoyed those, and I've played and not enjoyed Battles of Prince of Persia. For those that don't remember, this was kind of a spin-off for the DS that takes place in between the Sands of Time and Warrior Within, if I recall. It's just a top-down strategy game, much in the vein of others, and it's bad. It's not a good game for that. It's just slow. It's a lot of menus. And listen, if you're making a whole brand new strategy RPG type thing, you can do all the menus you want. But if you're coming off a spin-off from an action adventure game, it should be a little bit more like, tuned to that audience. Make things a bit quicker, make things a bit more accessible, make things get to the action a lot faster. And it just doesn't do any of that. It's just a bore to sort of play. Maybe if you're really into the genre, you can appreciate this, but I sadly do not. With that said, I still think, like, the graphics are kind of charming on the DS. I think being on the DS is a problem too. Definitely not the popperest of poppers. You can still control as well. It's on the DS. You're navigating menus for the most part. So yeah, not quite harem adventures. I keep trying. I can't believe this exists down here. Next up, a very controversial entry, possibly more controversial than Warrior Within when I really think about it. Prince of Persia: The Two Thrones is kind of like the rise of Skywalker to the Last Jedi, where, and I'm going somewhere with this, is, oh shit, we have to fix all the things that got fucked up from the last one that people didn't like. Oh, okay, so we're gonna try to like make a whole other thing here and fix this and fix that and add that, and then you kind of didn't please either group. They tried to make a midway point between the Sands of Time and the Warrior Within. I personally liked what they did. It has issues for sure. I want to put this in Prince of Training, but it has issues, right? First of all, just the Dark Prince having his energy constantly, his life power basically constantly going down is one of the most boneheaded moves I can think of. I know they're like, oh, he has to have some sort of disadvantage. It should not have been that. I don't know. It is not fun to play as him when you have that ticking time bomb constantly around his head. You just die. It'd be one thing if he just gives you temporary buff and then he reverts back to normal Prince and then you're like weaker for a bit. Like that could be a disadvantage, but the way it's designed in this game now is rough. I do like the stealth kill system they added and the quick kill system that they added, where you're jumping between enemies and you're basically doing a QTE, but that was the style at the time, so that's fine. I do really like the overall story. I like, the issues with the Dahaka and rewinding time, actually coming back to bite the prince in the ass once again. I like the fact that you're in Babylon and you're just going through an entire city this time. A lot of environmental diversity, a really challenging final boss fight, and boss fights in general. They have that gigantic like a giant, essentially, like a butcher's knife, and like two others, if I recall. Every so often I go, I really want to play the Two Thrones and like finish it, because they always get pretty far. I get farther than I do in Warrior Within. Like I said before, it has issues. It's still doesn't quite reach the highs of the Sands of Time. Again, the writing isn't as good. It's still sort of like kind of sort of desaturated and just doesn't have that exotic feel that Sands of Time sort of achieved. And the Prince issues, again, the Dark Prince issues, it just kind of holds it back. Rival Swords, much like Revelations, was another attempt to, hey, here's a port, let's change the name and let's do almost absolutely nothing with it. Pretty much no real improvements other than the fact that I guess it has motion controls because it's on the Wii, but that's not a good thing. So I'm gonna bump that down automatically to a solid dude, because I was fooled. Now this is subjective, but I was fooled thinking this was like going to be a super improved like ultra port of the Two Thrones, and it's just merely a Wii version that Ubisoft slapped a waggle on. But I hate how they had a cool new box art. Don't fool me, like, please, I don't deserve that. So Rival Swords, I think that's a solid Duke. It should have been as good, if not better, than the Two Thrones, and Ubisoft just didn't see fit to do that. Next up, Prince of Persia Classic. Now this is a remake of the first game, done in 3D and done with the Sands of Time prints and a few other odds and ends there that they carried over from the Sands of Time trilogy. I played this not even too long ago. I want to say 2-3 years ago again, just to see. And is it as good as classic Prince of Persia? No, the 3D art style just is not nearly as memorable. But I mean, it still plays well for the most part. It's very much a 360 downloadable game and looks it, but it's a notable attempt. They're at least trying to do something else with the franchise. I put this in Prince in Training. I have no real problems with it. It's inoffensive. It could have been a bit better. I don't know what else they could have done. I don't remember if there's like unlockable skins in this. But this was the last thing Ubisoft would do with the franchise for a couple of years until Prince of Persia 2008. Prince of Persia 0. Why the fuck didn't they give this a subtitle? This is the reboot where they did something drastically different with the franchise by making Elika your second character, essentially, that follows you around and helps you out. Lots of dialogue with her, an amazing art style, amazing character design, gorgeous music, a very interesting story too. Even though it's very simple, it is still very satisfying. Well, you know, maybe the ending isn't as satisfying as it could have been. We'll get to that in a second, but I really like this game. When I first beat it, like I think I got all the achievements in it. Maybe there were a few light seeds. I think that was the only one I didn't get, but I played the shit out of this, and I did slowly realize like this has problems too. I don't think it had the same impact as when I played Sands of Time. I want to like this way more than I actually do nowadays, because nowadays you play it and you're just like, navigating the world is kind of annoying. The fighting system, I'll give them props for, again, trying to do something very different, but I don't think it was any better, because you never gain any new attacks in this game at all. What you have at the start is what you have at the end. All the powers that you get are just navigational powers, and I do think that's a problem, because it makes the combat, and the combats have a big focus, and it's just a lot of like button hits that just chain into each other, and it looks pretty, but that's about it. There's no meat to it, unfortunately. The platforming, great. It's good stuff. And again, the music, the voice acting, the visuals do so much heavy lifting, a lot of it. It's very much style over substance, I think, Prince of Persia 2008. But I still like it quite a bit. I still, play the Steam version every so often just to look at it again. It still holds up, like, visually. Like, it holds up visually better than the Sands of Time trilogy, like, no doubt. And I like Nolan North's The Prince. I think he's a fantastic version of it, where he's more of a charming rogue. He's not even a prince that's not part of the story at all, really. A lot of people have problems with certain, like, more modern Prince of Persia saying, oh, but he doesn't look like the prince, he's not the prince. Well, yeah, every story, like, sort of does something slightly different with that. The Sands of Time trilogy, obviously it's the prince, but in this, he's just not. He's just this traveling asshole, basically. I don't know why they called it that, but it's a prince in training. I can't put it alongside Sands of Time. I just can't. Another remaster for this, that if they fixed this up and did some other things with it, I don't know what you could really do off the top of my head that wouldn't reconstruct a lot of it. But if a remaster was to come out, I'd still purchase it. Like, it's still, like, up there. What is very much lower than that is the Prince of Persia trilogy. This is the HD up-resing that Ubisoft did for the PS3, I believe. Not sure this came on the 360. No, it came on PC. And it's a dreadful HD remaster. They did these weird HD ports of a couple of things. This and like Splinter Cell 1. But they're like some of the worst HD ports ever. Where like literally, I think it looks worse than the games, because they got rid of a lot of effects and the textures were not up-res properly. I know it's a different thing than Warrior Within. Like, I know it's just an HD re-release, but it's the worst way to play these, honestly. I'd say the best way to play these is either the original Xbox versions running on Xbox One or Series S or X, or maybe the Steam versions. I think those are okay. But do not ever get this package. They're bad. All right, that's all there is to it. So along with Prince of Persia 2008, Ubisoft saw fit to release a DS exclusive called Prince of Persia: The Fallen King. It's cute. An attempt was made. Unfortunately, I think it controls not that great on the DS because it's touchscreen only, if I recall. And it's just not very precise. Lots of bumbling and fumbling with the stylus, and it's a little too cutesy. They did a little bit better later on with another release. So this I did not have that much fun with, and I have a hard copy of it on my DS. I definitely played through like a massive chunk of it for the Palace of Persia. The graphics are also kind of on the DS as well. They should have maybe made this for the PSP or something, or had a PSP version of The Fallen King just to see what that could have been, because I do like the idea of like, oh, then have a different spin-off for the handheld versions, and they did that quite a bit. We'll get to that in a second, but The Fallen King, yeah, I want to say no. I want to say Dire Dahaka for that. Prince of Persia: The Shadow and the Flame. This was a mobile exclusive. This is a Warrior Within coded remake of Prince of Persia 2, The Shadow and the Flame. This has combos. This has like XP you gain. It controls awfully. I even got like a little Bluetooth like iPad controller to try to make this playable, but it wouldn't support it, and there were still control-y janky issues. Like I tried to be like, let me play this in any other way that's not like a touchscreen, because that was just not fun. I really wish this had released on the 360 or PS3 like digital stores, so we can at least like kind of have it control somewhat well. They never did that, never re-released it, and it's been delisted for like over a decade now. No. The controls were the issue here, honestly. It was really, really rough to actually do anything, and it's just not satisfying at all. If this did get re-released somehow, and it never will, I imagine, then I would give it a go. Just to see, but yeah, it's not much better than any of these, honestly. Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands. One of 3 we forgot all these sands. I guess with The Fallen King and Prince of Persia 2008, Ubisoft just started franchising. We gotta put this bitch out on everything, and every version needs to be a completely different game. But the HD version, of course, is one released for the 360, PS3, and Steam. This one, I think I'm even more torn on what to actually, where to actually put it. Forgotten Sands has some stuff going for it for sure. It's another part of the Sands of Time trilogy, again taking place between Warrior Within and Sands of Time, and it's basically like other tales of this particular prince's life. And a lot of people are like, oh, this is based on the Jake Gyllenhaal movie. No, it wasn't. It was just released around the same time, the same month, to capitalize on its completely different story. But this has some interesting time powers. Its combat is again not great. They tried to do things with mobs coming at you and you're fighting a million enemies, but they don't take a lot to actually kill. You have all these magic powers like sandstorm and like fire streaks that you leave on the ground. It looks cool, but it just doesn't have the magic of any of the Sands of Time. I'd say even Warrior Within, it just feels like an inconsequential like part of the Prince of Persia's story. Like his brother's kind of involved, and then there's just a big demon, and then it's just kill that demon guy, I guess. And he still has his time powers because the medallion, I don't know. It gets all mucky. The story is not great, and after a while you just kind of stop playing it, and it feels like you're going through the motions. It doesn't really do anything new. I do really wish they had continued with like not done a Sands of Time game at all. That's something completely different, a different moveset, and just leave Prince of Persia 2008 as it was. Maybe not do a sequel on that. People will still burn on the epilogue. Remember the epilogue DLC for Prince of Persia, which really didn't, I think, help much more. was never released on PC, so PC only players from that time still never got to experience that. So it's very weird that that never got re-released. This is still solid. I would still say, if you've never done this franchise before and experienced any of them, yeah, Forgotten Sands HD is totally fine, serviceable. Do I like it more than regular Warrior Within? I think I like it more than Warrior Within. I think it kind of does the Two Thrones a bit better than the Two Thrones does, but it's still not on the level of Sands of Time. Yeah, I think it's equal with Two Thrones. Prince of Persia Forgotten Sands for the Wii. Now this is an underrated ass game. This Wii exclusive, again, was a totally different story. It was you go to this walled off city, and it's got this huge like plant demon that's infesting it, and you have a djinn, like a little fairy girl that is traveling around with the prince, and they're cursed to walk together. And this is a technical showpiece for the Wii. It looks really nice, and it's completely different combat. Yeah, it's motion control combat, but it actually kind of works. You have all these cool moves that you don't have in Prince of Persia HD. You have completely new platforming challenges. It's a really cool little Prince of Persia game, and because you use the Wii pointer controls, you use that to help with your platforming. You can like make little loops for the prince to grab onto. It was a lot of smart design there. Does it look amazing? It's a technical showpiece for the Wii, but it looks pretty rough, especially compared to the HD version. So there's that. The motion controls, again, are pretty subjective. I can imagine people not enjoying that. I really wish this got like some sort of fan upgrade port to the PC that cleaned it up and everything, because even if you try to emulate this on Dolphin, it still looks kind of rough. It's got this weird video filter problem or something. But yeah, it's a much more fantasy take on the source material. Like, you're in this lush city with like all this natural beauty, and you're fighting a completely different set of monsters, bosses, etc. It is a very interesting curio in the entire series. I simply can't put it on Sands of Time, though. I simply can't. So I'm going to put it alongside the HD version. Sorry about that. Prince of Persia Forgotten Sands PSP is a 2.5D version. I played it on this very channel a few years back. It's really solid. I don't think I like it as much as the console versions, but it's pretty damn solid. I'd say the story is what holds it back. It's got these really bad comic book cutscenes, like really bad. Like, you don't actually know what's happening, even though things are happening. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But basically, you're trying to save three like fairy djinn girls. They're sisters. I think it's the same, one of the sames that were in the Wii version. Anyway, it's the gameplay that we're here for, and it's kind of classic Prince of Persia. A little bit, just 2.5D. Boss fights are a little bit of an issue. They're not that fun, but the platforming challenges are challenges. Like, they're up there. They thought of some fun taxing stuff. So there is that. I would recommend this. Maybe all three on there. I don't know, because listen, Prince of Persia DS is another touchscreen only thing. It is better. It is absolutely better than The Fallen King. So I'm going to put that here, and I think these three equal out to the same, which is actually, very rare for when these games were released in 2010, that the Wii version would be on par with the Xbox 360 PS3 version, even the PSP version. So all three of these do something pretty neat, but they all have things holding them back. So I think, yeah, that equals out for all three of them. I hope that's not too weird to understand, but yeah, they all have pluses and their minuses, and they're all good princes in training. This is pretty good for a franchise. Having like a bunch, the most, in like third place, that's very good. Like, usually there's like a ton back down here, and we might be getting there soon, because our next one is Prince of Persia Escape. This is a recent-ish, 2018 maybe, mobile game that's essentially an endless runner where he's constantly running to the right and you're picking up gems. Here's the thing, though. This type of game design works with Prince of Persia, especially the first one, because it's a lot of just dodging traps and making jumps. So I kind of understand that. The problem with this game is that it's just kind of boring in the sense there's no music. That's weird. It's just kind of sound effects of jumping, and that's sort of it. And as you collect the gems, you can just use them on visual upgrades to your character. Like you can just make them look like Sands of Time Prince if you want. I mean, this is the classic PC version of the Prince, but you use those little gems to give yourself different outfits. There's a bunch. You can have different hats that give you like an animal skin, and there's a couple of like little nods to Prince of Persia stuff in the past there. This is definitely a time waster game. There's no story to it. It's just get to the end of the levels as fast as you can, and like much mobile direct, you're forced to watch an ad every minute or two as you play, unless you just buy it, because of course the free version has ads. Then you buy it to make all those ads go away. It's inoffensive. Is it on the same level as Warrior Within? Well, what it's trying to be, I guess. You know what? No, I'm gonna put that on Dire Dahaka, just because like I was bored after like 5 minutes of playing it, because there just really isn't a whole lot there. But it's sort of inoffensive. I suppose if I was gonna actually purchase it, I'd like it a little bit more. But because my experience was just littered with fucking ads, it was not that interesting of a game. Fortunately, its sequel, which came out in 2022, Prince of Persia Escape 2, is much better. I was pretty impressed with this. It's way more cinematic. It has combat. You can wall run. The camera kind of turns on an angle to sort of show you that. There's boss fights, and they have this nice progress bar that shows you all the different loot that you're going to get when you, not like actual monetary loot, just little in-game rewards like extra gems to help you buy more, again with in-game currency, help you buy other costume bits. And there's a bunch of Prince of Persia things from across the entire you can be Prince of Persia from 2008, you can get the girl with the metal thong, you can get Farah. You can get a lot of neat stuff. You constantly change out your weapons, and the actual stuff that you're doing in the levels is quite fun. There's lots of it's still just tapping the screen. If I didn't say this before, you're just tapping the screen. That's all you ever do. And this is the same thing. You're just tapping the screen, but they're much more inventive with the things that happen in game, and the levels change a lot faster, and there's multiple layers and depth to them. I was pretty impressed with this. I was halfway considering, can I just buy this? I was pleasantly surprised by Prince of Persia Escape 2. It's a bad title though, but whatever. I call him as I see him, and I actually thought Escape 2 was a huge improvement and probably the best mobile Prince of Persia game, certainly. Now we're getting to the more modern stuff. After a long stretch of nothing, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown came out. I think I had to have this on the same level as Sands of Time. This game has so much content, an amazing story. It has the best combat mechanics in any of them by far. The only thing that really holds it back is, unfortunately, cutscenes and stuff, it's all done through just portraits talking. There's a few little cutscenes here and there. That kind of just gives that sort of lower spec sort of vibe. I kind of wish they had done something a bit more with that, or made the portraits a bit more emotive. They're emotive for what they are. Some of the content, some of the extra things that you do are not worth it. Like just going through a really hard platforming challenge, and then you just get a little token that just gives you a buff that doesn't really matter, but you don't know that until you get to the end of that really tough platforming section. But the required platform that you have to do is some of the most satisfying. It is one of the best search action games. Yes, it's one of the best search action games I've ever played. I would love more people to discover this game. This was in my top games of 2024, so be no surprise. I think Ubisoft Montpellier absolutely knocked it out of the park. I just kind of wish this sort of been a bigger success, and it does so much new with the franchise. It really does. And I think searching around for the action and for the items really works for Prince of Persia. The Lost Crown also got some story DLC that I need to actually do. I did not do that stuff, but there was a ton of content added in post-release, like boss rush and tons of different costumes. Again, I'm imploring you, if you like action games at all, especially of the search variety, please play Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. It is a completely new story and new characters, and he is not the Prince of Persia, by the way. He's not supposed to be. There is a whole other prince character. You're just like his bodyguard, friend, etc. So remember that whenever you try to boot this up. Now we have our last release, and I cannot put it at nearly perfect prince, but the Rogue Prince of Persia not too long ago got a ton of content. I got like a visual overhaul, way more story stuff that fleshed things out and explains it, because this is still in early access. This is made by former dev team members that made Dead Cells, and does play a little bit like it, but I think the roguelike sort of game design works again with Prince of Persia quite well. You're constantly picking up new weapons, new powers. The platforming's great. In this new version of this new content that they added, there's this amazing new mechanic that wasn't in the original launch version, which is if you do a certain level of platforming actions perfectly with perfect timing, you then get like a buff, a speed buff that makes you go super fast, and there's like this golden effect on the screen. Like I was like, oh wow, this is awesome. I wish this had been in the launch version. But yeah, I really enjoyed going back into it a few nights ago, and it's really what spurred this whole video. But the game is not finished yet. It is still in early access, so I have not experienced everything that they're planning to do. I still think there's things that are not fully in there yet, so I can't definitively say how good it's going to be. The story is also very different. Again, brand new prince, brand new era. The story stuff that is in there is quite good. It's very intriguing, lots of charming characters, and very solid writing. I think I can only put it in Prince in Training because I need to actually like finish it, because it's hard to finish it when it's not actually done. So Prince in Training for the Rogue, but I can see myself liking this even more. I think that the room for it to grow and its potential is certainly there, so to be nearly perfect. That is Prince of Persia, the tier list. I hope you enjoyed it. Please praise me in the comments below, because you have no problems with this. No one has any problems with any of my tier lists. They're top tier lists for a reason. But let me know what you truly think in the comments below, or if you have any other suggestions for other games, characters, franchises that I can do tier lists for in the future. Thankfully, I now think that this one does have a future to begin with. Prince of Persia is not dead. Hopefully the remake of Sands of Time does come out, and you can expect more coverage of that if and when it does. So until then, I will see you next time in the Flophouse. South side, north side.